Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are based. Welcome to another episode of Reality Shift. My name is Gabriele, and I'm here with my co-host Anandas. Anand.
Hey everybody, this is Anand. I work on new use cases for the MetaQuest platform.
So I think that for today's conversation, we have really the best people here around. In a way, due to my broad interest indeed in XR apps, when especially it goes beyond the gaming side. So in these episodes, we will look at the XR content landscape. Right, we'll look beyond games, share some thoughts on what we think are some of the current opportunities for developers, including the recently announced lifestyle app accelerator from Meta. So I'm really happy to be here with you, Anand, and have a bit of a chat to see where we stand.
That sounds great. Let's do it. And I'll probably
So,
have a bunch of questions back to you as well, given the broader scan that you do across the market.
of course. I mean, happy to chat about this. So, one thing I wanna ask you first is maybe like, how would you describe right now the current VR or XR landscape? Right, when it comes in terms of content, apps, maybe even games. Right now, we can just looking at it. So, have you kind of like seen some trends or something that, let's say, stood out for you since you are at the inside of a lot of this as well?
Um, it's an interesting moment we're doing this because it's kind of the middle of the year. So I always feel like we're doing it first half report card for 2024.
I think that's the way we should name the episodes, by the way.
um, At a high level, I think the secular trend towards growth continues, right? It's the solid, steady progression towards more users entering the ecosystem. We're starting to see the users cohorts trend younger. There are obviously, I mean, you just have to see the numbers that Gorilla Tag put out. It's just astounding. And I think they publicly talked about $100 million in revenue. $100 million in revenue.
And by the way, for everybody, if you haven't seen it, you should check out the interview we had with the founders of Gorilla Tag. You should check it here in the channel because I think it's really you shouldn't miss it. But indeed, yeah, I think that indeed the younger generation is driving a lot of this, and I think that gaming still it's going strong, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, and also there's like two moments that we observe through the year, right? Like, there are adults buying it for themselves, and then there's the gifting use case, which usually kicks in during the holidays. So, one big shift that I'm noticing it, like having worked on this for about 5 years at this point, like it used to be that all the peaks was in the holiday season, and the rest of the year would be like kind of generally quiet. That's not the case now. We're actually seeing both the personal use case rise over the year and the gifting use case occur. So it's nicely that the growth curves are layering on top of each other, and it's creating this like solid year-round growth. It's still a little quieter in the summer,
Yeah, I
but
mean that makes a lot of sense. So who wants to wear like a headset maybe, or playing when it's hot outside and it's sunny? I mean, I think it does make sense, right? People, we cannot blame people for that.
the median is higher though, right? Like what I mean, like the height of the curve in the past used to be like super low in the summer. Now it's higher. So I think like that to me was, I mean, both the shift towards the younger audience and then the fact that the growth curves occur consistently throughout the year, at least like it's not this pronounced effect of like quiet and then it's all peaking in the holidays. That those are two big macro level shifts that I'm observing. Um, I think generally the introduction of new platforms has also energized the overall market, right? I think ABP coming to market, I mean, despite whatever the press has written about, ABP not selling enough or whatever, I think it's super, super, super positive for the overall ecosystem. And we talked about this in the first episode, right, Gabriel?
Yeah,
Like,
And I think also, again, check out the first episodes. But regarding trends and the indeed hype, but I think it goes. It is not necessarily about hype. It's more like also bringing back the fact that VR at that point, in a way, contrary to what you said, is not necessarily only about the gaming, but there is all a whole other world that is also what AVP is pushing for, right? For example,
Yeah,
productivity and maybe media consumption. So, and there is back. It's like, okay, there is a space for others, for other type of content that goes beyond purely the games that indeed is clearly
yeah.
Apple is clearly not prioritizing. So I think it's bringing back, it's saying, it's re-energizing the market, but also saying, hey, let's not forget about this. And I think let's not forget about the productivity side, the lifestyle side, how, let's say, we decided to call it. So I think it's certainly that having an effect.
Yeah, spot on. I think the core gamers continue to spend money and buy more frequently in bigger games. So that's like really good. Um,
And I
also,
was
like,
checking, actually, I was checking, sorry not to interrupt. I was checking, actually, Reddit is a great place where I think you can really feel like the vibe, because it's really like these close knit communities. And some people were asking, but how come now there are so many nice games going out? It's not like before. And I think it's true. If you need to look at specifically for the gaming side, there are always this game that is like, oh, this is actually quite nice. I can actually play and get good value out of it. Also, a good amount of hours. So, and you really feel like how people feel about the kind of content that's being put out. So I just wanted to resonate on that, because I visit a lot of those communities. And by the way, for anybody, I think it's great places to be, like the Oculus Quest Reddit, the virtual reality Reddit. Those are pretty big. And I think it gives you like an impression of what people feel and experience.
that's right. You'll also notice in these communities that in addition to the core gamers who first bought into the vision of the platform for as a gaming platform, you see also like adjacent gamers. I mean, these are people who like do not consider themselves as core gamers, but they do play games. I mean, you just have a look at all the mobile gaming. If you look at the mobile gaming market, or Xbox, or PlayStation, or even like Nintendo Switch, right? And
Uh-huh,
Nintendo
uh-huh.
DS, there's a category of games that you wouldn't call like hardcore games. Like these are Sims. I mean, think of like Plant vs. Zombies, think of like Animal Crossing,
Casual,
Farmville, like
casual, right?
casual, cozy games, right? I think what's ended up happening is that audiences, as the install base has increased, the people who are gamers, who are in the category of like casual gamers, are also picking this up. I mean, I would be one of those. Like my son and I, we play casual games on Quest now as a bonding activity. So I think that's a new trend that's emerging as well. So I think like between gaming, I think is like, we say gaming is growing. I think it's important to understand that there's core gaming and then like I guess it's called mid-core gaming. Mid-core gaming is also doing well. At GDC, there's a little bit of talk about this, and we can share this in the show notes, where folks on the games publishing team publicly talked about this. Like, hey, here are the kind of like games we're looking for, and they talk about like casual games a lot. It's because of this phenomenon. And I think if you're a game studio watching this, like, it's not just looter shooter zombie scares.
No,
Love
and
casual games.
this also, I think, has a lot to do with the nature of how the headset is, right? It's not necessarily a place where you want to be for 1.5 hour of intense gaming sessions. You can also be there for just 20, 30 minutes, get your droves of little adrenaline or escape or puzzling, whatever game that might be, and just remove the headset. So I think
Yeah,
that's true. And I wonder also if that would be interesting. But then I think we're going to shift more towards other kind of conversation.
yeah,
Is the if the mixed realities somehow contributed to that, right? If having the casual gamer more in a place where he feels less detached from the real world, but have being mixed reality, and then he can kind of like still play, still be connected. That's maybe the gamers that doesn't want, or the players, the user that doesn't want full immersion. Maybe it still wants to have an eye of what's happening around. not sure if that could have contributed, or maybe those are what people are playing.
It's a really good question. Um, it is true that mixed reality has made the whole category more approachable for the average person, right? Even if you're walking into a retail store to consider buying a device, the steps to try it on are much more familiar to you because you see the world around you, right? I think that's like definitely true. I don't know yet if more mixed reality equals more gameplay, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if that causal chain has fully played it. We need to see Quest 3 was sort of the first mainstream, affordable mixed reality headset. And I think we need to wait and watch a couple of years to be able to look back and say like, okay, hey, more immersion, more wow and wonder equals more gameplay. Like, does more mixed reality equals more gameplay? We'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there, of course, there are many, many other factors, right? It's not just about the type, but also like the cost
Right.
of the headset. But we are not here to discuss about. Yeah, please, no.
I was going to ask you, like, I mean, the other thing is like also entertainment is starting to become more acceptable as a mainstream use case. I mean, we saw that, right? Devices launch, like people cook. But then they're washing dishes and they're watching YouTube videos, or like they're like cooking and they're like watching something else. So I think like chores are generally boring. And when you're doing chores, like keeping your phone in your hand as you do chores is like literally impossible. But putting the headset on, no matter what headset it is, and doing chores is like more. And media watching, I think, is a thing. Like this is why I think Apple Vision's a large part of the value prop is like media consumption, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Um,
not sure that that would be something that follows you while you do the chores right now, at least in the current state. I'm not sure about that. What I've seen though, I don't know if that could be considered like media consumption, but I've seen more and more people, for example, using to play Xbox, for example,
yeah,
games on that. So it's still not what people would say the primary gaming use of a VR headset, but I mean, I totally see their having value, right? But when we look, for
100%.
example, about Apple Vision Pro, that was a lot more about media streaming, media consumption, watching movies, because again, the quality of the screen and the lenses is pretty high, and then, so, but still as a steady experience on your couch, right, or on a bed or on a plane, right? This kind of setup, I would say.
Yeah. Watching streaming services, which obviously is, I mean, between Netflix, Amazon, and a few others, it's like a handful, right? Disney Plus is a thing because then you're replacing the screen. And actually in Asia, this is true. Having lived in Japan, with lived experience, people don't have spaces. There's like not enough space in your house to put a 60-inch TV. What do you do? But
It's a
yeah,
good
with
point.
300, 400, $500 device, like you have space suddenly to be able to check the screen, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you can also be in the beach while doing that, right? Because that's also the point. Maybe you can kind of like isolate.
That's right.
But one thing that.
So watching concerts, and watching live sports, those are all like better than going to a theater or somewhere else. So like for sure, yeah.
Agree. Now we also have to be fair, right? I think that it's still like not necessarily all nice and good when it comes to also, for example, companies building content. Some people are maybe not necessarily having a hard time, having an easy time securing funds, or maybe necessarily pushing their app. And making the revenue that they were expecting for several reasons, right? So, what do you think maybe are still some of the challenges that developers are facing right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. By the way, we can talk more about like the other categories we're seeing energy around, which is why we talked about the lifestyle category as a new category,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
we can
yeah,
come
yeah.
back to. But
Of course,
let's do your
100%.
challenge first. Um, I think everybody wants a hockey stick,
Hmm.
and the growth is like it's not like it's asymmetric growth, right? It's like symmetric growth. It's growing, and I think uh, at least from the VCs I am talking to and working with, it's still they still. I mean, if you put AI in your deck, you get funded. If you put VR in your deck, it's not that you're going to automatically get funded. You get asked questions, or not even VR, but like MR or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, like there's a bunch of questions like how are you going to grow, like how are you going to monetize. So I believe that growth is the single biggest perceived constraint
Hmm.
that that investors look at when looking at developers and companies in this space. It's not a real constraint because then, like, why would you ever see like a gorilla tag like if growth's a constraint? So there's like within bounds, I think it is true, but in absolute, I don't think it's like 100% true. There are obviously, I mean, if you're a gaming studio, you should just build and you will make money. The other categories, the question is like, how do you um, make money and be successful and grow? I think enterprise is super clear how to do that. Um, I think it's a very, 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 very strong market there for
And just to be precise, you're talking about when building content or apps for enterprise. That's what you are referring to? Hmm. Okay.
between trainings, training simulation use cases, events use cases, 3D modeling, whether it's architecture or design or like those, like those markets are waiting to be taken, and growth is not a constraint in those markets. And the reason is because you have this nice like. So here's a secret code that like when I talk to founders, like the thing that I try to emphasize a lot on should think of the HMD or the headset experience as like best experience that you can possibly deliver. But you also need to have a companion experience outside the headset because people are not wearing the headsets all the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the journey between mobile to headset, desktop to headset, and this is like true for, I don't know if it's true for the gaming use case, but it's definitely true for business use cases because it's
I agree.
workflows
Yeah,
across these
much more.
devices. This is also true for lifestyle use cases. Like, I mean, you just look at fitness, right? Like, have you close to your rings on your Apple Watch is a thing. So you'd require a journey between the watch and the HMD experience. If you're doing things like shopping and fashion and arts and crafts and DIY, and like you have mobile AR on a lot of these devices. So I think the journey in headset, like it's available everywhere, and then it's like best in headset. I think that is a magic trick, but it's like really, really important to solve this headwind of like growing as fast as you possibly can and monetizing um, a lot more than you can if you were just building only an HMD experience. Because I think user acquisition and growth cycles, growth flywheels work so much better.
Yeah, so build up that as a sort of a bridge, for example, to yeah. I mean, that's also what we have honestly seen as shapes. I mean, in this case, as shapes being like, let's say, headset first, right? VR first, because indeed to create spatial content, we really believe that you gotta be in headset. But in that case, I think it's also important to look at how you can get other people in that maybe don't have or don't want to get a headset. And I think that's also why this, let's say, the web editor is it's the first step. And again, even though building that experience, it's not necessarily straightforward in a way that makes sense, that also doesn't devalue the primary experience, right? The primary headset based experience. So I think that that's a journey, and finding the right balance between oh, I'm going to build the same thing as an app, uh, still doesn't degrade or make lose or devalue what is the in headset experience. So I think that is another important point.
Yeah,
But then would you
you're
say
absolutely.
would you say that when you look at this, when we, because we started from asking what are the challenges from developers, right? and and you mentioned is like, look, I think then from game side you should just be careful and try to focus and build the right thing, right? Because growth is not necessarily a constraint. Well, instead, if you're building more for a B2B kind of audience, then trying to bridge that gap into the headset with something that accompanies it, right? On a 2D, on a mobile, on desktop. Those are some of the things, correct?
Yeah, you nailed it. Yep.
And so, what about this specific maybe example regarding what is lifestyle? Right. Because also the point of this lifestyle app, first, okay, first you need to explain me. I think it's a very nice name. I really like it because I would, of course, I would be struggling with like productivity or whatever, but that is will still wouldn't grab everything. But lifestyle, I think it's a very good name and it's generic, but still specific. Um, so what is a lifestyle app? What is the definition here? Because then we can start from there and start discussing about these apps before and before we move into the topic.
Uh, Super good question. Um, so just to cap the conversation, right? Like over $2 billion worth of like basically $2 billion we spent on the store so far. There's over like 500 spatial experiences, right? Like not flat 2D experiences, but like immersive or mixed reality experiences. So in a questly like the momentum grew. That's kind of like the story. That's the report card for the first half, right? Users are
Right.
spending more time and more money, and the ecosystem is growing. Um, Lifestyle is this interesting thing that slowly over the last 4 years is emerging as, you say gaming, you can say entertainment, and then you have like lifestyle. Basically what it is lifestyle. The way we think of lifestyle experiences are experiences that help people do what they already love in their real life there. Like that's like the core definition, right? That could involve leveling up life skills, connecting with others over shared interests, experiences that integrate into daily consumer habits, often things that serve not just the primary buyer or the gamer, but other users in the household, right? A lot of the time, these experiences are relevant and appeal to women, and sometimes even parents, right? Like the broader idea really here is there are classes of consumer experiences that already exist in the real world, which can be super powered as a part of your lifestyle in the HMD. So the starting point is like not experiences that sit in HMD. It's like actually experiences happen in real life, and then you want to create the bridge into the HMD is how we think of lifestyle. The first signals of this was fitness and wellness, right? Like, think about how fitness happened, right? Gamers were already moving, and then
So
the
why don't
action
we
of
start building an app around it, right? It's like Beat Saber. Hey, I'm kind of sweating here. Maybe why don't we build something specific around it? Yeah, makes total sense.
and the first lifestyle category that actually got traction was fitness and mental wellness, not just like physical movement, but also like mental wellness, right? With Trip and others. Um, these apps, think about whether it's FitXR or Supernatural, Les Mills or Trip, they all have a common attribute if you notice. These are not isolated use cases like gaming sessions in the headset or like separated from what you do in the real world. These are all integrated into your life activities, which was working out and feeling better about and working on a mental journey and a physical journey. They were all things you already do in the real world. On sunny days, you would go for a run. On like busy days, you're in the headset working out. These all have non-headset workflows. Think about it, like Trip you can get on mobile, Les Mills you can get it on like 2D, and you're watching it on like your TV and you're working out, like maybe like they all have this like nice little pattern of like real life habits. There is a 2D experience. It's best in headset, and it allows you to level up your life. So like, those attributes. And actually, as we saw more people use fitness and wellness experiences, a lot more of them turned out to be women, right? Like, I mean, just like, it's really interesting that there is this latent consumer behavior already emerging, which have these attributes. So like that is about the consumer's lifestyle. They're making a choice because if you know, and now we're getting really warmed up, you can see like the biggest challenge, Gabrielle, for any new product is to get people to care enough to overcome the friction of the alternative. And if they're actually already doing it, then the question became for us like, why? And it turns out that as long as it's better than reality and it enhances your reality, you will make the choice, right?
Yeah, that's also very subjective and very app dependent, right? So I mean, how would you say
Totally.
yes, that is like it might better be for someone, might not be, but I could
Well,
totally see how certain things can be at least also not necessarily replaced by reality, but complemented by
that
a digital part.
that compliment, the word compliment that you use, Gabriel, that's it. That is the core of what a lifestyle experience is. It is not about replacing. Um, yeah, spot on. So that's the definition of lifestyle. And we saw this emergent behavior. And over the last 4 years, the fitness and wellness vertical became a thing. And then we started seeing with Quest 3 and mixed reality and the presence platform, we started seeing hackathon outcomes, which were super interesting in a bunch of other categories.
Mhm,
Whether
mhm.
it was like food or so music and learning is a thing which we saw next, right? I mean, that's the reason why Piano Vision was in the Quest 3
Yeah.
launch video. It's a thing. I mean, this is another example. Like Zach, who's a founder, doing really well with products, and he's just like such a. If you look at his product, I mean, there's still work that to make the UI more accessible, but he has made it easier to. It's basically the equivalent of software eating the world. Like he's basically eating the real world piano.
No, and I
Um,
think it's one of the. I think it's an incredible example. I mean, I've played it. I never played the piano, but deliberately, I went to the library where they have one, and it's like, okay, I want to see if this actually can work. I was there calibrating because you need to have a process of calibrating the piano with the actual keyboard, and there, and it's like, oh, actually, I could see myself learning the piano with this, right? So I think it's again one of those examples that I mean, here is that good, and I would even say replace the learning piano thing. So I wouldn't even say maybe complement. Of course, you will still need to learn the piano yourself and probably practice without the headset. But yeah, I think it's
like in certain sessions, it replaces the piano, but like this is where I think leveling up your life skills and complement the work matters. You take the headset off, you carry that into real world. You walk into like a real world piano, you can still play, right? Um, so I think the complementarity or complementability of these experiences matters quite a bit. Omre, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, who's built Paradiddle, another example of these, right? So we saw fitness and then we started seeing like learning, consumer learning use cases, which have the same pattern. And then hackathons started happening where people were hacking mixed reality, hands, AI. Um, Sometimes these experiences were like no controllers, it was just like hands only. And then because of the AI boom that we're seeing, people are just like, we're able to like stitch these things together. And so we
I'm
said like,
curious.
okay,
I'm curious. I'm also curious about this AI part. I just want to add one thing that
yeah,
maybe was not clear or as evident. It's also the creativity side, the creation side of apps, right? When you start sculpting and creating something when you are in this digital form. I think those are also another category of apps that also are the one that tends to potentially scale to a B2B kind of things, right? But for example, indeed, there are other apps that allows you to indeed be creative, right? And I mean, we can talk about shapes, we can talk about Gravity Sketch or Archeo, but there are, of course, let's not forget some that are maybe more less B2B, like it could be, for example, Paint in VR or Figmin or
Stripe.
Jet Tribe. Yeah, exactly. So you go into the music side, right, as well. So I think that this is also something that is done very, it's very powerful when it comes to being in headset, because again, you don't have the space, maybe you don't have the equipment's super expensive, and so all that allows you really to be creative and express yourself. And the other thing is that people often forget is that when you are in VR, doing some of those actions is just so much more intuitive than instead being on a table in front of a software, right? So when you need to grab an object or move a cube, you just do it as with your body, right? So you don't need to know, okay, wait, let me go to edit mode, let me grab the gizmo, then I move this blue arrow. So it's just a different way of creating. And this is, of course, with it could be 3D modeling, but then it turns into music. So every aspect has these kind of like elements that contribute. So I
Yeah.
think also creativity is very strong potential for this lifestyle way, let's say.
So now, having heard the definition of lifestyle, like, did that make sense to you? I'm curious to get your take. Like, does it
I
make
think
sense or like?
I think it does. So it is a way to augment or let's say enhance and complement activities that we do in our daily life. So this puts gaming aside, and anything that falls under that category, right, of life complementing app and experiences, I think it does make sense. So yeah, I think it's a very good definition. I still stand by my statement.
Okay.
And so I wanna you mentioned quickly, because then we are gonna discuss also about this app accelerator, right? Because I'm curious, because the point is that not tapping into such a bigger market, like indeed gaming, that is the primary use case, also has its own risk, right? Because you're building something for a market that might not be fully developed yet.
Yeah.
So that is something to consider. But before going into it, you made this quick detour into this AI side. Curious, like seeing some interesting implementation of AI in this early prototype. That, by the way, I love, because it shows really how, with unrestricted boundaries of creativity, people can just put together and start creating something and building concepts. So I think it's very valuable. Like, what are some of the examples that you have seen that implemented AI in the process or in the app, in the experience?
We saw, I think, a couple in cooking
Mm-hmm.
where using voice activation, and I think I'm not sure if they called ChatGPT or they called
Mm-hmm.
Llama 3, but they were able to, like, the implementation essentially was like, assume you're in a kitchen and you're like, you have your headset on, you're looking at the refrigerator. I think this is the hackathon, the New York hackathon, where we saw this, where they were like, hey, like, I have X, Y, and Z in my kitchen. What can I make?
Right.
And then it gives you what you can make. And then they grab that stuff and you would put it on your kitchen counter. The timer pops up of like, okay, you are going to make this. And now, like, that's 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Step
Mm-hmm.
1, make this. Step 2, make this. And because, like, the interesting thing with cooking, I mean, you still have to be very thoughtful and careful. You don't want people to, like, be with heat and sharp objects and all that stuff. So, like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is, like, this better than reality or like compliment comment you made, Gabriel. Imagine when you're cooking, right? Holding the phone up or an iPad or a tablet, and then you're like flipping through the recipe, you're doing something, flipping through the recipe, hands are messy. Like, I think the parts of the process of making food, especially like the once you got the right ingredients, like, where I think hands-free matters a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I
So
agree. I think
that's but
but so then going back, we mentioned about briefly risk being in the lifestyle category,
yeah.
right? So, and that's, I think, one of the things that where the accelerator, the lifestyle app accelerator, is trying to mitigate, right? So maybe you can give us a bit of an impression of what is the
Yeah.
accelerator and how what's structured.
Yeah. You're absolutely right that, like, we want to be able to, like, enable these founders to continue to take risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the venture investing in XR is happening at the growth stage,
Mm-hmm.
or like Series A and beyond, which effectively means that if a founder is going to spend their next 3 to 6 to 9 months of their lives prototyping and hacking, it's like seed stage stuff, which there likely isn't much of a, I mean, it's basically you're on your own sort of stuff, right? So when we're seeing energy in hackathons where people are trying to do these things, and we know that there's this gap to go from like a hack to a product. A product means not just software, it's also thinking about, like, how do you make a business out of this thing and how a sustainable way to make money. There's this window where the founder is taking risk. the outcome of the risk is really valuable if done well for building great consumer experiences. And someone has got to like help them out. And so the intention of the accelerator is to provide uh, prototyping seed capital to
Hmm.
individuals and teams building lifestyle use cases. This is a version, a lot more of a, I guess, a mature version of what we did with fitness and wellness 4 or 5 years ago, right? Where the glimpses of a market are there, glimpses of consumer behavior is there, belief in the device and the technology transforming it is there. Capital is not there, and you need to like help the founders on their journey to product market fit and growth. And so what we're doing effectively in the program is um, three things. We're giving seed stage funding for prototyping to small teams. Two, we're actually going to surround those teams with technical product and design resources to build those experiences. So it's not like, hey, you go off and build it in isolation and come back. It's a lot more,
Hmm.
we're like in the trenches with them, building with them
Support.
product choices, growth features. Um, and then we're not actually going to do this alone this time around, which is why we partnered with uh, a small group of investors who believe as much as we do, in between like Andreessen, Bitcraft, Lightspeed, Boost, and Alarak. Like founders will get the support that they need to
Hmm.
be able to build their companies and like also think beyond HMD, right? To our earlier point of complementing life and mobile workflows, um, like we're focused on HMD, and they could use some help and advice on non-HMD stuff as well. So that's why we're going to do this with these investors together. So yeah, so there you have it.
So I think that for everybody listening, right, we got on one side, we know now what a lifestyle app is. That's great. We know that there is program. So I think the next question is, how can people like be part of it? And it's like, are there some requirements? Like how does the screening? Does everybody gets it? I don't think that's the answer, right? So how does this work?
Yeah, there is an application process. Um, we could share it in the show notes. It's as with all things, uh, as with all things early stage, the answer is more qualitative than quantitative. There is no checklist,
Right.
right? But I think the ingredients are very clear. It's the team, it's the idea, and it's like the proof of executability, right?
Mhm.
And so you just like need those three things because the outcome and the definition of success is a prototype, a mechanical proof of concept or a vertical slice. If you're a studio, you would know what this word means. That's the goal, which means software is the outcome
Yeah.
of the program. And it would be awesome if the graduates from the accelerator cohort get follow-on funding from investors. It's like they're able to raise capital, which is kind of the trend that we saw for fitness and wellness, right? We help them in the seed stage, and then they graduate, and then they get funded by the industry. So the criteria is just that, like teams who. So I think there's like a detailed list somewhere on the application website, but just like
Yeah.
top of my head, it's not for late stage teams; it's for early stage teams. So before Series A, it's okay if you have another product that is launched on the Quest platform or any platform and it's grown and you want to build a second product.
Hmm.
Like that's okay.
Okay.
It's not a seed stage company level thing, it's seed stage product. So if you want to launch a second product, it's totally fine. Must have Unity or Unreal or like even like the ability to program in XR, like it's just like not negotiable. Um, and I mean, we're not limiting it to solo founders or teams. I mean, solo founders are fine too. Like Zach was a solo founder, like Amre is a solo founder. So that I don't think is a constraint, but I think the ability to build um, is
Yeah,
primarily
and
the issue.
You mentioned another thing. So the executability, as you defined it, I think it's important, but I think also the idea. at this stage is also like it's also becoming critical, because you are entering in a space where I think there is tremendous potential for innovation, and we have seen not much. Uh, I mean, we are just scratching the surface of what is the opportunity here. So I think that when we look about the idea, I think it's also very very important that you mentioned hackathons, for example. I think that is like also a good place to see what people are building, and feel inspired, and try to be critical a bit with yourself, right? Are people doing trying to do something similar? And uh, and if I'm doing that, how am I different in building that, right? So I think that is a very important thing when probably pitching it. So let's say something that I've seen also a few times is a plant watering app, right? Imagine, so there has been this idea that it can help with this task, right? But how can you give it a unique perspective? How can you give your own perspective that tells a different story than just the technical aspect that certainly is going to come up, but how you do make sure that the plant is really watered and whatever. So the point is, how do we expand this? How is your idea different, unique? What's the angle that you are taking, that this is going to make it a more appealing story to tell, or something that is worth investing in, right? So that's, I think, another important part.
So, you touched on something super important, which I didn't quite talk about. Um, there are a few categories where we, based on what we know, we think there's a potential to build the next set of verticals. And we publicly call those out. So we've not done this in the past, and with this program, we're actually publicly declaring what lifestyle is, why it matters to us, and what specific ideas and categories we think will find product market fit over the next 4 to 5 years. And we talked about fashion, design, all consumer use cases, right? Fashion, design, cooking, do-it-yourself, arts and crafts, music. And we have seen organically like ideas come up in like dating or like shopping. So like there are things that are organically come up. So we've called these things out. What we're looking for is founders who want to build in this space. What we're not looking for is also important. Series B or later, it's not the right program. If you're doing one-off marketing activations like AR or MR marketing, no. Video games, there's already like a path to becoming a successful company. We don't need it. Same for fitness and wellness. So your idea and the manifestation of this idea like actually is really, I think, critical. If you have like interesting ideas, we've seen like in a hackathon, Gabriel, this blew my mind, like a book reading experience. Like, what is the future of books and comics?
I agree. I've experienced a couple, and it's interesting. I think, yeah, it is. It is something that you can wonder also. How can these be? Do we want this to be augmented or not? In some ways, that is another. And because books, again, you mentioned another important thing. It's not necessarily about the story or the novel. There is the comic. There is the educational book, right? So you can go deeper into that category, and try to understand how you can build an app only around comic, right? You can build an app only around novels, or so. Again, I
The
think
what I like this, I mean, now we're getting into product ideas, but like the device has some superpowers which people seek when they want to buy a Kindle or when they want to read books. Have you watched this movie Valerian and a Thousand Suns?
no, actually.
Oh, it's a sci-fi movie. Anyway, I'll spare you the details. But there's a scene where they are on a beach reading a book, and then there's a call that comes in from the space fleet, and they head back to the cockpit. The whole thing is a simulation. You can literally be in a photosphere beach with spatial sound with a book, and like you're lying in your bed. So it's a bed use case, and you're like reading. You don't need a controller. You just have to do that, and the page flips, right? And the publishing and the book industry is an industry that exists in your real life. And It's a business where you can actually, as founder, build like, so there's like opportunities there like we haven't even thought about. So yeah. Anyway, you got me excited about a specific product idea. I'm not trying to
Agree.
sell
And
it.
exactly, exactly. Let's not all now start pitching books, books up. But maybe while we wrap up, Anand, I was curious, like more from a maybe even a personal perspective, right? What advice would you give to people that are interested? And so
Mhm.
we said about these three important things being the team, the capability to execute on this idea, and of course the idea itself, right? So
Yep.
those are three important things, and it's not like a check mark kind of thing. It's indeed also a qualitative aspect of it, right? So what kind of advice would you give when jumping into this and trying to apply for the program?
Um, I think you captured the three ideas pretty well. And Gabriel, we talked about this during the show multiple times, right? This is a long game. It's a long game, and so be prepared to um, build and iterate with the community. That I think that the quality of persistence is, I think, like the underrated superpower, and like you have to believe that you can persist and you want to persist. I'm curious to get your take, Gabriel. Like, how would you? What
So
advice would you
one
have?
one thing I would do is that sometimes I see people and teams jumping on an idea because they fall in love with it without necessarily doing the proper research and evaluating what's already out there. Because the point is, again, you can rebuild something, but you need to have your own perspective in order to make it stand out. So we mentioned a couple of times hackathons as a place for, let's say, an incubation for idea. I mean, a lot of those projects can be seen online. Anybody can see those, right? I mean, there is
Right.
dev post. You can go there and check it out and learn a lot of what people are
That's
building.
right.
There is the App Lab, there is SideQuest, there is the Apple Store. So if, I'm curious, and I doubt people have done a proper research of what is lifestyle, what are people, what is the unique angles that people are taking to this. So the first is do your homework. That's a bit the thing that I would suggest. And if
Hey,
I can just add
that's
one,
useful.
right, the other one is like I think that you mentioned it's a long game, and I see no undoubtedly that people that have already built something will have an advantage because they have proven their capability to
Hundred
execute.
percent. 100%.
So the point is, when are you gonna start? If you like this, right? Because you can always keep waiting, right? And but I think is that building something small provides you an opportunity to show that you can execute, and maybe at some point, right? I mean, you will be able to leverage that as a chip that you can play, right? But I have executed. It was a project. It was a small one, but look what I did alone, or with just the two of us, or with just the three of us. So if there are these two, is one is do your proper research, and I mean really do it. Be critical with yourself. Don't just fall in love with your first idea, because that's really when you challenge yourself that you can have the chance to really make a difference. And second is, I mean, just start, build something, even on a very small scale, because indeed you might think that it's a long game, but if you don't start, you will never have the opportunity to leverage this work that you did to play it as a chip, as a validation chip that you can execute. Those would be my two.
Super solid, specific, tactical advice. Great.
And I mean, I think that there is no other way things to do than send people to the description, because you're gonna find the let's say the application form and then the other information that we mentioned during the episodes. And I think it's a great opportunity. I'm a strong believer in, especially when it comes to design and creativity, that there is a huge space, and music and so forth. Uh, I believe that XR is made for that. So, but anyway, whatever you think, it's absolutely a good place to start and to the risk what could be actually a great opportunity. Anand, anything else you want to add?
No, this is, you summed it up really well. And we'll put all the details in the show notes so people can go find it and they know where to find us if they have questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure, and I will see you for the next episodes of Reality Shift. Bye bye.